You're listening to The Little Green Cheese, Episode 4. Well, welcome back. I'm Gavin Weber, and this is where you can learn about making cheese at home. Well, the exciting things that have happened around the house this week is that on Sunday I made an Emmental using the recipe that I've got in my cheese making book, and it turned out very well indeed. I use normal pasteurised and homogenised milk, store-bought, and the curds shrunk as they should have done. It pressed well, and it is now in the cheese fridge at about 12 to 13 degrees centigrade, and every day I'm turning it and wiping it down with a brine solution. So at the end of this week, what we're going to do is place it in a warmer area. It's about 21 degrees, between 20 and 22 degrees, probably just on the side of the bench with a bit of cheesecloth over the top to keep the flies off it. What will happen for 3 weeks is you still turn it and brine it, but it starts swelling. So the bacteria, the starter culture that you put in it called propionic shamani, which feeds on the lactose in the milk and creates CO2. So that's what makes the holes in your Swiss-style cheese. Anyway, more on that as we go along and as it develops. Well, this week we've got an interview with a lovely guy called Gürkan Yeniçeri, and he's from Canberra, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him during the week.
Hi everybody, my name is Gürkan, and as Gavin said, I'm from Canberra. I've started cheese making at around 2009, and since then I'm hooked up to the hobby. I have participated in forums. I'm writing a Turkish blog, and I have given a couple of workshops in Belconnen in Canberra about cheese making. And I have given some other workshops as well at home, just to get people introduced into the cheese making and see actually how easy it is.
So what was the reason that you started making cheese?
We consume a lot of yogurt, and I was looking for a yogurt machine on the internet, and the same website was selling the cheese making kits as well. So as well as buying the yogurt machine, I also bought a cheese making kit. And since then, I'm making cheese at home. And at the moment, my cheese making equipment is consuming a lot of space in the kitchen and in my study. And half of the fridge is full of starter cultures and other stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
The freezer is full of those. And but I mean, yes, it is taking a lot of space and it is taking a lot of time and effort. But the end results are quite good. So far, we haven't thrown away any cheese that I made.
Yeah.
And everybody is enjoying it, and my friends too.
Oh, fantastic. So what are some of the cheeses that you make?
As every starter, I have started with the feta, halloumi, mozzarella, and ricotta. Feta is something we consume a lot, and every morning in the breakfast, every sandwich has got feta in it. Most of the salads has got feta in it. So as a Turkish guy, we are consuming feta a lot. So that's one of the cheese I made regularly at home. Apart from these, when I get confirmation from my wife for a second fridge, a modified fridge in the garage, I've started making Gouda, Camembert, and some of the hard cheese like Kasseri, some of the other hard cheeses as well, as much as I can. Then after that, I have increased my volume to 40 liters with the two 20-liter boilers in the kitchen, and got myself a really big, a nice a cheese press with a air piston on top of it.
Yes,
and it is quite good. So. I mean, whatever I can take it as a challenge. The last challenge I was trying was a comté from French.
Yes.
French cheese. It's a very hard cheese to do, and took me a while to gather the ingredients as well. and the starter cultures and the washing the morge, as the French call it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you were mentioning Comté, the French cheese.
Yes.
So what sort of things are, what sort of special, do they have any special cultures for that?
There are at the top of my head I can't remember. It's written in my notebook. But there are mixtures of mesophilic and thermophilic cultures in it. And there were some the gas producing ones as well, but not much. Getting the ratio was quite hard for me. Because I was mixing them by myself out of the industrial big cultures, the one sachet goes for 1,000 liters or 500 liters or so. So, but it turned out quite a good cheese. The story is one day I bought some Comté from the shops and brought home, and then my wife goes like, "Oh, why don't you do something like this?" And then I go like, "Okay, that's a challenge." And I've tried a couple of times. It turned out quite good, although it wasn't the same the taste that I have gotten from the recipes. It changed here and there, but it is still on my to-do list. I have to try a couple more times just to get the actual taste out of it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Emmental. And my wife, she loves Swiss cheese, so she said, "Why don't you make Emmental?" And I went, "Oh my goodness!" So I've made it twice successfully, and with really small holes, not big holes like you get in normal Swiss cheese, because they make like 60-kilo rounds of cheese.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, they got small holes, and they taste nutty like a Swiss cheese. And I've got one in the brine at the moment that I made on the weekend, so that should turn out quite good.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I like a nice Emmental. So you mentioned that you make your cheeses in the kitchen. So what kind of... You mentioned you were making, 40-litre batches, is that right?
Yes, 40-liter milk in one go, so that I can make a big veal out of it, especially when I've tried things like Gruyere, Emmental. I mean, that requires volume in the cheese just to get the holes going bigger.
Yes.
And it is. I am enjoying actually more when I do a big batch, because it is the same effort you are showing at the end, and the cheese should be big at the end.
Yeah. So how big's your cheese press? It must be massive.
Cheese press itself is not really massive. I can put a 25 or 30 centimeters diameter basket underneath.
Yeah.
And it is an air piston, one of those pistons with when you put air in it, it pushes down the same amount of pressure. So my biggest problem was the follower, to find a follower. So I grind some cutting boards, kitchen cutting boards, the plastic ones.
The plastic ones,
to the diameter of my basket, so that I can actually press the cheese.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
So that's like food. That's food grade plastic. So that's that white plastic.
Yes, it is one of those. Yes, HDPC, I think it is called.
Number one.
Yeah.
High density polyethylene, I think.
Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. So do you have any issues when you're making that volume of cheese, or is it just like, when I make cheeses that are about 8 litres of milk, turn out to be about a kilo. Do you have any, as you increase the volume, are there any extra things to worry about?
When I've decided to increase my volume, the first thing was the press, to get a good press, so that I can press it with the enough amount of pressure on top of the cheese, and it shouldn't be changing. That amount of pressure shouldn't be changing in the time goes.
Yeah.
My first press did have this 50 lb coil, but when the cheese is pressed, the coil is getting opened up, and then you don't have exact same pressure on top of the cheese. Yeah. That was the first problem. The other problem was to get the cheese ripened, to get the cheese aged correctly. Yeah. Once you go bigger, you need a fridge. You need an aging environment with the 85% humidity and 10-11 degrees Celsius temperature in there.
Yeah.
Keeping those constant, it was also an issue. Apart from these two, I didn't have any more issues. When I do cheese, at home, I usually keep the kitchen quite clean.
Yeah.
Everything is sterilized. I have a boiling water and another water with bleach in it, 20-to-1 ratio. And everything is sterilized. All the kitchen benches are sterilized with 50% methylated spirit and 50% vinegar on a spray bottle. So I spray everywhere and then clean it up. So there's never been an issue. Only one time I was making bread the same day. The bread yeast, I think, jumped into the milk somehow from the air, and my halloumi turned into there were like little holes in it all over the cheese, and it stink a bit. It was still okay. Right. It was eatable. Yeah. But then I've posted on the forums. We have a little forum that this thing happened, and they said, it's the cheesy, the bread yeast jumped into the milk.
Right. Yeah, so it would have been
I'm
airborne.
Not making bread the same day.
Yes. Well, funny you should say that. I had a problem with a couple of parmesans that did the same thing, except they expanded so big that it was just like a big cavity in the middle. Oh. And I never thought that my wife would have been, because we've got a bread maker in the kitchen, and she might have had bread on at the same time I was making the parmesan.
Okay, that might be one of the reasons. Yeah,
I'll certainly have to watch out for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of your favourite cheeses to make? What are the ones that give you the most pleasure when you're making it?
Gouda, most hard cheeses are quite pleasurable to make. And for example, Gouda is quite good, and it's one of the quick hard cheeses that you can make and eat in about 2 months' time. You can enjoy. Other than that, the Kayseri or Toma de Valmonte is one of the cheeses I like to make.
Yes. Yeah.
Other than that, the feta and halloumi is like our staples. I'm doing it all the time whenever we have access. Yeah.
Yeah, feta's really simple to make, isn't it?
It is very simple, and once I have a really special culture for feta at home.
Oh, goodness!
Which I have extracted from kefir. To use the kefir as a thermophilic starter culture.
Yes.
I have prepared the strained kefir in the yogurt maker.
Yes.
So yogurt maker keeps the temperature at around 43 degrees Celsius. And all the mesophilic bacteria dies in it. So only the thermophilic bacteria leaves.
Oh, yes.
And I run this like 5-6 generations in the yogurt machine and got really stable thermophilic culture out of it.
Oh, lovely.
And I am using that culture, and it gives quite a good taste. I have actually given some of my feta to a Bulgarian friend. And he goes like, "Oh, mate, you take me to my childhood," which was a good indication.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, the Bulgarian feta taste is a little bit different than Greek feta, isn't it?
It is very different. They also use sheep meat. Yeah.
Yeah, I make the what I think anyway is the Greek version, but only use cow's milk. I don't have access to goat or sheep's milk, which I think they mix together. So, it's really good that you've got a special culture to do that. Really good.
I don't know what's in it, but mostly the thermophilic, whatever is left from the kefir, I guess.
But it works, right?
Yes.
So what are some of your favourite cheeses to eat, and they don't have to be cheese that you make. What are some of your favourite cheeses?
My favourites are like Camembert, blue cheeses. And the mixture of those two is Cambozola.
Oh, yep. So it's a bit like you can buy it commercially as like a Blue Costello or something like that.
Yes, it is. It is like that, yeah.
Yeah. So that must. Can you make that?
Yes, I've tried a couple of times. It turned out really, really good. Actually, one of the online shops I was always buying my stuff from, they brought this Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same as the bread yeast, but for cheese. So it makes holes in the cheese, and then you can fill those holes with the blue later on. So
right.
I've tried making the Camembert with it, and the blue bacteria in it, Penicillium roqueforti.
Yep.
And it turned out really, really good. Actually, I'm quite amazed that, because I was reading on the forums that nobody is getting much success out of Cambazola, as we call it.
Yes.
But the first make, it was quite awesome. So I've continued making that. It's quite a good cheese. It's a mixture of tastes and blue and the camembert, those penicillium, the other bacteria, the white bacteria in it. So it turns out quite good.
Yes. So so it was the mesophilic culture that produced a little bit of gas. Is that correct, to make the air holes?
Mesophilic would work. Which one was it? Helveticus, I think, or one of the mesenteroids. Some of the. They do make. Yes, they do make some air holes, but I am brining the cheese rather than dry salting. When I brine,
right. Yes.
When I brine, they don't have much. I think the saltiness is getting too much. That those bacteria doesn't work.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you need something else to get those holes in it. Actually, on my home cheesemaker's Facebook page, there is I put some pictures of the Cambazola there, and then you can see there are like little holes right in the middle. There is no any other air outlet from there, and actually glue grown in it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, what I'll do in the show notes for the podcast, I'll put a link to the Home Cheesemaker's Facebook page.
Yep.
And do you have a blog? You mentioned you had another Turkish.
I have a blog, but it's in Turkish.
That's all right. Google Translator works fantastic these days.
Yep, cool then.
So just send that through to me, and I'll put that into the podcast show notes as well.
Yep. All right then.
Okay. So I've got a couple more questions. So, you eat cheese, obviously. Do you have any particular drink that you like to enjoy cheese with?
I'm not much of a drinker, but the Turkish raki, that is the aniseed liquor.
Oh, that's lovely, yes.
That I drink from time to time, and that actually really goes well with the Cambazola, with the blue camembert. Oh,
the two flavors would be intense, wouldn't they?
Yeah, it's quite intense, and I actually enjoy my cheese with home baked bread, like a rice sourdough or some other home baked breads.
Yes.
And they are working quite well with the homemade bread.
Yeah, freshly baked bread and homemade cheese. There's no substitute for those two tastes.
There isn't. If you pay $1 million, you can't get it.
No, that's right, and you never will. All the homemade stuff's the best, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Have you got anything else you want to share with the listeners around cheese making, and any words of encouragement for, say, new cheesemakers?
New cheesemakers. Before you start a recipe, put down the recipe on a piece of paper and see how much time it's going to consume. When I've started making cheeses, it is actually consuming like a half a day or the whole entire day sometimes. Although there are like spaces in between, and you add the starter culture, wait 1 hour. You add the rennet, wait another hour. You cut, wait 15, half an hour, and then you mix and stir whatnot. The thing is, if you're making a long recipe like an Emmentaler or Comté, just write down everything on it and see how long it's gonna take, and then arrange your day and your busy life around it. If you start like somewhere in the afternoon, you'll never be able to get into the press before you can go to bed. Like one day an Emmentaler took me 3 a.m. in the morning. I was still enjoying.
Yeah.
I was still enjoying, but it was taking too much time. So if you make your decision about what cheese and then put down the recipe, write it down and see what you need, how much time you require, and then you can plan your day around that.
Very, very wise words indeed. I wish I had learnt that when I made a Wensleydale, which took 9 hours from milk to basket to the final press. So I was up until 3 a.m. as well. I think it's something that every cheesemaker needs to learn. But once you've learnt it, that's you certainly won't forget your 3 a.m. cheese making experiences.
Yes, definitely. Also, taking notes when you're making the cheese makes quite a bit of a difference. When you do little changes on the cheese, when you wait for another 15 minutes, or when you increase the temperature couple centigrades more degrees, it makes a difference at the end result. And if you are not noting that, and when your wife says, "Oh, this cheese good, make it again," then you don't have anything to go back to. you have to take notes.
Yeah. So I do that with blog posts. So on my cheese blog, Little Green Cheese, that's where
Yeah.
I take my notes. So if I've done, when I make that cheese, I write down how I made it particularly.
Yeah.
Then I can go back. Exactly the same as to having a note or a notebook. But yeah, highly
Yes.
recommended. That's really, really good advice. Any other tips, or is that that you come up with?
Well, my other difficulty was when I was trying to go bigger on the 40 from 20 liters milk, from 8 liters milk to 20 liters and then 40 liters.
Yeah.
So like the baskets I have at home for cheese pressing and draining, it's like quite a bit. So I could have bought some others and then leave some other space in my cupboards. That would have been good. So making a decision about how much milk you're going to process in one go is another important factor. When you change the amount of milk, then you change the amount of rennet, the amount of starter cultures, amount of other stuff, and then recipe goes the other way. If you want to prevent that, you work always with the same amount of milk so that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're going to brine the cheese, you'll actually have to figure out how much longer per weight to brine the cheese for as well.
Yes,
So
definitely.
yeah. So if you're only pressing a 1 kilo cheese, you only need to leave it in for say 12 hours. But if you're pressing a what's the end weight that your 40-liter cheeses usually turn out at?
That becomes like 3 kilos or so, maybe 3.5. One of the hard cheeses, some hard cheeses like that, and the soft cheeses are like maybe 4 liters. I'm using quite a good cow milk, which I'm getting from a friend. So it is quite high quality, all the fat and everything in it. There's nothing
Still in it.
Yes. It is quite a good milk, and it gives me 40 liters usually gives me 4.5 kg of feta.
Oh, fantastic! So you'd have to brine that for quite a long time, though, wouldn't you?
Yes. I pasteurize the milk anyway, and then the more brining increases the aroma and the intensity of the cheese.
Yes.
In the beginning I was using 12-20% brine with the salt level.
Yeah.
But now, according to my wife, of course, I have decreased down to 8%, and it is sitting in there. The cheese is solid, not melting or anything.
Yeah.
And it is quite an enjoyable thing. As soon as you take it out from the brine, you can eat it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got for hard cheeses like say Parmesan, Romano, and Emmental, I use a fully saturated brine. So for those listeners that don't know what a fully saturated brine is, it's when you keep adding salt at room temperature until you start seeing salt at the bottom. It doesn't dissolve in the water anymore. And I think that's at about 20% salt to water. Is that right?
20 or 24, I think.
Yeah, roughly.
Exact, yeah.
Yeah, so those hard, high temperature made cheeses really need that amount of salt in them. Whereas Gürkan, as you said, with the feta, you don't need as much salt in the brine to make a good tasting feta.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's been really good talking to you, Gürkan.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast.
No problems at all. Thank you. Anytime you want to have a chat on the show, just drop me a line.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye.
Well, we've got a great story this week in the news. It's a classic. It's from the Sun newspaper in the United Kingdom. It's titled The Pong Arm of the Law. I'll just read a bit to you. It's quite funny. Heavy-handed cops have banned an elderly grandmother from making a massive double Gloucester for a world-famous cheese rolling event. Farmer Diana Smart, 86, has been making special handmade cheese for the downhill run for 25 years, but health and safety obsessed police have warned her not to make the giant cheese for this year's downhill 200-yard Cooper's Hill near Brockworth, Gloucestershire. In an apparent bid to stifle a dangerous event, 3 visited the pensioner, telling her not to donate 5 8-pound wheels. It is the first time in its 200-year history that police have banned a cheesemaker providing the cheese, leaving organisers considering using something else instead. So the event kind of goes like this. The event sees runners reaching speeds of up to 70 miles per hour as they hurdle down the steep slope after the rolling cheese. Injuries suffered at the cheese rolling include broken arms, legs, and even backs. Following health and safety fears, 2009 was the last official cheese rolling event, but unofficially the event is held every year without proper medical cover or insurance. The organisers of the annual spectacle said they will defy any bid to stop the race from happening. A spokesman said, "It's outrageous, completely unbelievable. You cannot stop somebody selling cheese. If they try to stop us, we will use something else or get some cheese somewhere else." Matthew Sinclair, Chief Executive of Taxpayers Alliance, slammed the police for threatening Mrs. Smart. He said taxpayers will be appalled that the valuable time of 3 police officers was wasted trying to scare an elderly lady from withdrawing her involvement in a centuries-old tradition. Well, there you have it. True, yet scary. So as I mentioned before, the cheese of the month is Emmentaler, or Emmental, or a Swiss-style cheese, whatever you want to call it. It's the world-famous cheese made in the alpine areas around Switzerland. As I said, it has the addition of a propionic shamani, and I said that's what creates the holes or the eyes in the cheese. So, like I mentioned, we are just looking after it, making sure there's no mold growing on it, turning it daily at this stage, and it will sit outside. I think I'll take it out of the cheese fridge on Monday, so that should be very interesting, and watch it swell over the next 2 to 3 weeks. It doesn't swell very much because it's only a 1 kilo wheel. The larger this cheese is, the larger the eyes are. So we will be tasting that in about, let me just see here, I think it's about 4 months. Yeah, so, 3 months it ages for at about, it's 7 degrees, but I can't get my cheese fridge down that far, so I will, because I can't keep the humidity high enough either, I'll probably end up waxing this cheese, which is no big deal because once the holes or the eyes have formed, the wax doesn't have to expand or contract, so it's no big deal. So that should be good fun, and you can keep it bare if you can keep the humidity up. The humidity for this cheese needs to be 85 degrees. So if you can keep it humid in your cheese fridge, and I can't, so basically I wax most of the cheeses that are in mine. So that should be good fun. So we've got 1 or 2 listener questions this week. Well, the first question's from David Case, and he asks, I was wondering what you could tell was wrong with this cheese. It was very hard to get the curds to adhere on another. This is less smooth than our previous farmhouse cheddars. The one thing we did differently is that we held the target temperature for the duration. Well, what I think may have happened, and it looks like he sent me a photograph, so it's hard to describe a little bit on audio. So the cheese hasn't held together during the pressing. So what I would recommend, and it's hard to fix now because the cheese will fall apart. Just wax it the best you can, David, and basically leave it for its maturation period. What you could have done, if you had seen that at the end of your last pressing, I would put it back into cheesecloth again and press it for a little bit longer, probably flip it and press it at a little bit higher poundage or kilograms, whatever system you use. And that way, probably leave it for another 6 hours, and hopefully the curds will stick together. The reason they're not sticking together is quite simply that there has been too much whey expelled from the curds. Basically, what it could have been is the type of milk you used, there's many factors that this can happen. It's happened to me once or twice, and I've managed to get away with it at the end by simply pressing it a bit harder. What has happened is during the stirring process, there's been too much whey expelled. The temperature could have been a bit high. It's difficult to tell unless you're actually watching the person make the cheese. So, look, I haven't been much of a help for this one. Like I said, you could have saved it if you had pressed it a little bit harder again at the end. However, the curds look like they're too dry. That's why they won't knit together. So the next, it's not really a question, it's a comment about the cheese blog, and this one's from France.
Hi Gavin, Jean-Michel from France, from Nice. I've seen your videos on YouTube about making camemberts. It's just great. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. I'm going to try to do this and let you know. And I'm reading your blog at the time. And I'll tell you more about that. Okay, bye. And thanks again.
Well, thanks, Jean-Michel, for your lovely comment. Jean-Michel actually left me a message or a comment on YouTube on the Camembert video, and it says, "Hi, superb. You can say you have learnt the Frenchman. I am how to make a Camembert." Smiley face. Well, now I have to make a video on how to make pudding or chutney, just to balance things. Thanks a lot. It was quite funny. I had a good laugh when I read that comment on YouTube. Thanks again, Jean-Michel. So that's all we got time for this episode. There are upcoming workshops which you can find on the Little Green Cheese blog. You can also find my cheese-making ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese, the Beginner's Guide to Cheese Making at Home. And it's available in all ebook formats, and you can purchase directly off the site as a PDF. You can also find my cheese-making video tutorials within the ebook or on my YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, Curd Nerds, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Little Green Cheese podcast. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes and left a comment or a rating. That'd certainly help promote the podcast to all budding cheesemakers. During this podcast, you heard royalties-free music by Kevin MacLeod. I played Malt Shop Bop, News Theme, and Call to the Dairy Cows.